again, everybody. I'm Jamie.
And I'm John.
And this is the Elvis Archival Preservation Society. If you're a big Elvis fan like us, this is your society, our society, the EAP Society. We as Elvis fans have had there's no other way to describe this, a glut of releases over the years and different ways, finding ways to capitalize in different aspects of Elvis's music and finding new ways to approach people and reach out and that kind of thing. And it's been going on longer than I think people realize. The topic today is remixes. We should first kind of parse a little bit of differences between like remixing something and actual what we think of today as remixes, which are technically, that's not quite the right term.
Right. Any kind of revisionist mix can be considered a remix. Now that could be something as simple as with these albums, just taking the master tape and readjusting the levels to make a new master.
Maybe muting some stuff.
Muting a couple of instruments, bringing a few more up in the mix.
Mm-hmm. There are some FTDs from 1970 from the 1970 stuff that actually does some of that as well.
That is a version of remixing.
It is.
Then you can get more aggressive. You can take Elvis's voice out and put it on completely new arrangements, such as was done with the Guitar Man sessions in 1980 and has been continued with things like Viva Elvis.
Yes.
The Junkie XL remix and the
Paul Oakenfold.
Paul Oakenfold's Rubberneckin'.
Yep.
So you can take just part of a track and recontextualize it in a totally new track. Or you can do something sort of in between, as we saw on This Is Elvis, where they took original masters, some from television, some from the studio, added new instrumentation to it to make it sound different, but still the same.
Yeah.
Then you can go the furthest with the as with the new Baz Luhrmann soundtrack, which takes pieces of lots of Elvis songs and new instrumentation and almost makes entirely new songs with those pieces.
Yeah, yeah. I would say I would put this and Viva Elvis almost in the same category. This goes a little further.
But there are important differences, which we will get to.
Yes, absolutely. So I kind of want to take these in sort of like chronological-ish order by degrees of extremity.
Yes.
So the first two things, and I have the FTD and I didn't think to bring it. Apologies. The first things I would say would be these two, Our Memories of Elvis. Ah, there's that not for sale demonstration.
There it is.
On the back. These were my dad's. My dad worked for a radio station. So these are I just love that. It's
so the Our Memories of Elvis records were an idea that I believe Colonel Parker came up with.
I think so, yeah.
Shortly after Elvis's death. And they sold this as the pure Elvis sound. Mm-hmm. It was supposed to, you got rid of all the overdubs that had been put on the albums.
All the overdubs.
You just had, quote unquote, the experience of what it would have been like in the studio, except that that's actually not at all what it was. It was a heavily revisionist, stripped down mix that removes backing vocals in some instances, instruments in some instances, and creates an entirely new version of the song that they sold as the pure Elvis sound.
Yeah.
Now,
sometimes sometimes taking out things that were in the undubbed.
Right.
And leaving things that were overdubbed, but that they felt didn't crowd Elvis's voice.
Yeah. Most of the decisions that were made in these mixes were made to give you Elvis's voice in greater isolation.
Yeah.
There was nothing covering it up.
Yeah.
And I think these records did pretty well when they came out.
I would expect so. And yeah. The Memories of Elvis series, RCA Records.
What year were these?
So let's see.
This is 79.
Okay,
So this is volume 2, so that one had to be probably 78.
I'm guessing that to be the case. Produced by Joan Deary. I think this says 79 as well. So maybe earlier.
Yes, it
maybe
does.
Earlier and later in 79.
So these are both 79 entries.
Yeah.
They were still fulfilling Elvis's contract with RCA for 3 records a year.
Right?
Even after he was no longer with us.
Yeah. So you have these, and this is essentially, like we were saying, there's nothing added. What they've done is they've taken the actual master and they've either muted or they changed levels on things, they've muted some things, but these started out as the complete final masters,
Right.
just with things stripped away.
Right.
Fascinating. Lots of fun to listen to. I enjoy the heck out of these things.
And I will say, like, I have no problem with this type of revisionist mix so long as it doesn't replace the master.
Ding.
If this is something that you have in addition to the master, it's perfectly fine.
Yep.
And in fact, I enjoy listening to these albums. I have enjoyed the Memphis record that was kind of the same thing.
Exactly.
It added a lot of digital echo that some people have problems with. But
Yeah.
if you're not listening to it as the definitive version of the songs, but rather an alternate version from that time period, it's quite a fun listen.
It can be enjoyable. Yeah.
And we've got revisionist mixes on all of these box sets down here.
I'll take these and set these.
Now, you also have a lot of outtakes, which never were supposed to be released to begin with.
Yeah.
But even the masters here
But it's still what's
presented-
on the tape.
Right. It's presented in revisionist form, but you are working only from what is on the tape and from post-taping mastering tools.
Exactly.
There is no alteration of the sound that was made in the studio other than what you can do through a little bit of levels and compression and
Yeah,
such. Yeah.
and I believe, well, and obviously some echo and reverb.
And echo and reverb, exactly.
Yeah, compression, echo, reverb, and EQ. And yeah, so I mean, these are very enjoyable. The same thing with the Elvis 1969. And, this is where everything's gonna fall.
Yeah.
This heavy bad boy is what was keeping all of this afloat. And we've talked about this, but same thing. You know, definitely revisionist mixes. I would like to see the originals available, but until that happens, these are very nice.
Well, in a lot of instances, there wouldn't be original mixes for this stuff because...
Sorry,
Right.
Mixes that maintain the original aesthetic.
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you.
A vintage style mix on that would be very nice.
Yes.
These are very modern style live mixes. I think they sound okay, but I'm not a fan of how much echo is on Elvis's voice on these because the original album didn't have that much echo on his voice.
Yeah.
Some of the Anacini mixes of these shows that were on FTD are, I think, far superior than the mixes on this box
I
set.
agree with that. Yep.
But it's because they, respect the original aesthetic.
Sure.
Like you were saying.
Yeah, well, they're going for the original aesthetic. The idea here was to present it in what eventually will be considered a then modern context.
Right.
And that's going to change. But, I mean, they're trying to reach new audiences. And so that's kind of the point of some of these things. Way down in the Jungle Room, not the masters. They were not touched, sadly, I would say, in that case. Way down in the Jungle Room, the masters are the same, but the outtakes have been heavily. I mean,
Right.
our memories of Elvis level played with to get I would say some pretty incredible results. I mean, I loved that when it came out.
Yeah, like my only problem, and this is a problem with a lot of stuff that is mixed by Matt Ross Sprang. I don't know him personally. I have absolutely no opinion on him as a person. I'm sure he's a wonderful guy. I have complained on this channel before about how I do not like some of his aesthetic judgments.
Yeah.
The one that I like most is the second disc of Way Down in the Jungle Room.
Right.
But it's a little too loud.
Okay. Yeah.
And like it's nice to listen to for like about 10 minutes, but then I start getting a headache because it's just mastered a little bit too loud.
Yeah. I can see that.
But it does give that stuff punch. It gives
Yeah.
it a little more life than you would have otherwise. I much prefer what he did with that stuff than what he did on From Elvis in Nashville,
Yeah.
which I've talked about
Yeah.
before.
Well, now one of the things I think that one of the reasons I think that is because of the narrative that has built up over the years about the 76 sessions,
Right.
about how they were lifeless. Elvis wasn't in a good mood. There wasn't a lot of, there's no energy, yada, 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 yada,
Yeah.
yada. So to have those mixed and mastered in such a fashion to give them the maximum amount of punch and energy, I think does them a service in a release intended for the general public.
Sure.
It's because it takes that narrative and just tells it to kick rocks. Like that's the biggest bird flip to that narrative.
Right.
Part of that narrative of which was built by people involved with RCA, and that's as far as I'm going to put that. That I think is a shame and is honestly incorrect in parts.
Right.
Not entirely.
And I
but
almost
parts.
wonder if like the success of that release led Sprang when he was given the 1970 Nashville stuff to try to do the same thing,
I'm sure.
and it doesn't need it.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, especially on tracks like Funny How Time Slips Away, I don't need the drums kicking me in the butt on that. Like it totally takes away the nuance and subtlety that makes that
Right.
master beautiful.
Yeah.
I loathe the mixage on that set. And it's not the only one.
No.
It's a very heavy-handed mix, which is why I don't like it. I much prefer the stuff that's come out. I even prefer Lene Rydell's mixes of the outtake material that are on the FTDs. And I do not say that lightly.
No, I know you don't. And as I said before, to me, because I was such a fan of, say, the Brightest Star on Sunset Boulevard, that kind of rehearsal sound.
Right.
I thought it was interesting hearing stuff that I was used to feeling more mellow with, in more of like this is kind of almost brings it to an August of '70 vibe,
Right.
which for me is fine, with the caveat that we get session releases.
Now this, I know exactly what went wrong with the mix on these.
Okay.
I think he started from the approach of bringing up the bass and drums,
Yeah.
that really tight rhythm section. And what happens is because Elvis has such a low tone in his voice in 1969, when you bring those up, you start losing Elvis.
Right.
So in order to create a little more definition, he puts this like a delay echo on Elvis's voice, which separates it from the backing band a little, but also sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound live.
Also because of where you need to. The other thing is, it might be that allows him to EQ Elvis's voice in such a way to bring it more forward.
Sure.
But it does the same thing as it definitely intrudes.
And
Where it doesn't need to.
I say it sounds ridiculous. I'm still glad we have this set. I'm still glad I get to listen to these shows.
And it's still very listenable. It's not like not like it's not.
It is listenable, but it gets on my nerves.
Right. Yeah.
Back in Nashville,
You can simultaneously enjoy and complain.
right. I think Back in Nashville is actually the best job he's done on anything he's touched since the Way Down in the Jungle Room.
And you know what I think part of that is?
What's that?
Your opinion of his mixes gets better as the narrative around the sessions decreases.
Well, and also as my love of the sessions decreases. I love the gospel sessions, but I think they sound fine here.
Sure.
I love the 71. I like the 71 Christmas sessions, but I think he sounds kind of bored through a lot of it. I like stuff like Until It's Time for You to Go, a lot of the non-soundtrack. I especially love We Can Make the Morning.
Oh yeah. So
And I think he does fine with those. Like, I don't have a problem with this.
it might also be the material that's there.
Right.
Because it is a little different for him.
Right.
He's not quite doing the same things. And I think part of that is because he knows he's dealing with gospel and Christmas material.
Sure.
So he's not going to balls to the wall
Yeah,
gospel and Christmas
exactly.
material. So
Thank God.
he has to mix them in more of a
I mean, if he did with Funny How
country.
Time Slips Away, why not? You know?
Well, yeah, but there's a far cry between Funny How Time Slips Away and, like, say, there's only so balls to the wall you can go with Holly Leaves and Christmas Trees and and He Touched Me and some of that stuff, because the tracks that don't have drums
Yeah.
have to fit with the tracks that do have drums. So there's only so much you can really drive some of that stuff. You can on a few things, but you have to be really subtle with it, or else everything starts sounding. And I will say, across the board, to me anyway, I don't mean that they sound like each other,
Right.
but I mean, like, each release, like it or not like it, it doesn't seem like the sound changes wildly from track to track.
No, that's true.
It's consistent.
And that, like, that is one of the jobs of a mastering engineer. It
Yeah.
would just be nice if you'd have a little more respect for the range of material that is offered. Like,
Sure.
I think this release is just fine. You know my feelings about From Elvis in Nashville. I've made no secret of it. I adore those sessions. I
Yeah.
despise this release. And the only reason, like, if I had other versions of the shows I don't have in here, I wouldn't have this release.
Well, of course.
I would get rid of it.
Yeah.
But because it's got stuff I don't have elsewhere, I'm keeping it until they do it again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And to me, I mean, I feel largely the same way about the 1969 box, but with the caveat that it also depends on how we get it.
Sure.
Because I really like the presentation here.
It is a very nice presentation.
yeah.
All of these are pretty nice presentations.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, he's a slightly younger guy. So not younger, but slightly. So, if these are something that's a little more aesthetic for younger ears at the time,
Right.
and it reaches some people, cool.
Right.
As long, and like you said, as long as we still have the originals, as long as we get the originals and more of the sessions, well, the complete sessions, that would be more. And mastered by Sebastian, or mixed mastered, worked
Yeah.
on by Sebastian. These are fine. They won't get as much play.
I know.
They won't
And
get as much play, which is fine.
I will say I have not listened to the Elvis on Tour box set that is coming out. Other than the couple of scattered tracks that have been released, what gives me trepidation is the name of the guy who's mixing and mastering it. Yep.
I will say it's going to be interesting to hear some of that stuff, because we compared. Now, it had been a while since I listened to any other sources on some of the rehearsal on tour stuff, but boy, when you had me go back, so far, sadly, unless something is changing between now and when that set comes out,
Right.
what we've had before in some cases is markedly better.
Yeah. Yeah, from the couple of tracks that are out there, it sounds like he's once again riding the limiter on the bass drum to bring the overall track volume up, which takes the oomph out of the bass drum.
Yeah.
And also there's like a lot of echo applied to Elvis's voice in
Yeah.
the rehearsal tracks that we've heard,
Yeah.
which when you compare it to the Amiga set sounds really muddy in comparison.
It does.
And like I'm not gonna judge that set until I hear it completely.
Yeah.
When I hear it in context, it might completely change the way that I think about this. I am hoping,
But I
that
doubt it.
I'm really hoping this is evidence he's developing more of an ear for Elvis stuff. The Back in Nashville set, but judgment is outstanding.
Well, I would say I think with him it's a case by. I think he approaches these with a case by case basis. Like I
Right.
said, you can't mix this the same way you can mix this stuff. You can, but if you do that, it loses consistency.
Right.
Because then the tracks that don't have drums are just totally different. So you have to make adjustments for that. So with Elvis on Tour material, That's no longer the case. So again, so case by case basis. Um, like I'm sure that it will be. I'm sure I will enjoy the stuff that I've never heard in multi-track quality before.
Right.
Like there is one Hampton Roads track that sounds great, but it's because that's all that that everything else has been. Even the stuff that's in stereo is kind of stereo and kind of that's kind of thing. And so it'll be kind of like the '69 set. It'll be great for now.
Yeah. I do get frustrated as someone who is a 70s Elvis fan.
Yeah.
That it seems that the opinion of those in power at the major label are very protective of Elvis's recordings up to about 1969. And then they're like, hey, go nuts. Do whatever. It doesn't matter.
Well, part of that is the fact that up until 68, 69, you have a lot less tracks to work with, so there's a lot less that can be done. If we had the Blue Hawaii soundtrack in 16 track, I'm sure they would let him go ape crap on that too, and I'm sure they'd let him go ape shit on that too.
Don't make me have these visions.
But
hasn't Ito Eats suffered enough? Haven't we suffered enough with it?
Well, thankfully for Ito Eats, there's only 3 tracks for that thing, so it's all good.
Yeah.
So there's only so much. I mean, I would say the limits of what can be done with that material, as far as extremity,
right?
Not as far as quality, but as far as extremity, the limits of what can be done with that are definitely belong on 30 number one hits.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
Can't Help Falling in Love is pushed about as far as you can push something.
Yeah.
With like,
and it has a lot of the loudness problems that I'm complaining about here too. Though I think the mixes are a lot more sympathetic to the material on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and also part of the problem, and there's been a lot of, I think the Steve Hoffman forum talked about this a little bit.
Right.
The 5.1 surround mix was pre-mastering.
Really?
And so it's better. It doesn't have the loudness problems as much.
That is interesting.
Yeah. So
that is the version that I have, and that I've listened to most often of that album.
The 5.1?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like the stereo, like the one that everybody bought, is like brick wall.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, the version of A Can't Help Falling in Love, it does what you would have expected that to do from hearing these. It's just like, oh my, wow, it's like crunchy.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I did have it on CD as well, and I also, I prefer original mixes in most instances.
Sure,
there are certain exceptions, but
and it depends on who's doing those as well.
Exactly.
For instance, we've talked about this before. The 2000 Promised Land
is a very good mix. Yeah.
I have a hard time saying if I like it better than the original, but I might.
I like the original Promised Land, but I don't know, man. Hearing them just a little drier, a little more like that is actually more pure Elvis the way they did it.
It is,
even though it has the overdub still.
It does.
They're just.
It does.
It's a more. What that does is it takes the limitations of 1970s mixing and mastering out of that album.
Yeah. I would have liked to have heard the Jungle Room sessions given that treatment.
Yeah, if possible. I definitely would have loved
that.
Well,
I know it's possible because we know from the tapes that David Briggs has that those things can be bone dry.
Right.
Like you need a glass of water after listening to some of that stuff. It's dry. It's so dry. So that kind of gives an idea of some of that. And I would say 30 number one hits, and these would be the furthest you can take something that is, it's just what's on the tape. Oh, and the Memphis record, because that really changes a bunch of stuff. And boy, they were just like, that's called having fun with faders in the studio. Yeah. There's like just all kind of like, it's like, okay, just either kill it or either kill it or leave it in, because it's like that's the way that's faded up and down.
So like it's a nice alternate look at the Memphis stuff.
Sure.
If you don't look at it as definitive, because like especially in stuff like in Gentle on My Mind, you can hear a lot of harmony vocals much more clearly that Elvis overdubbed himself.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
And so it opens up certain aspects of the masters that you wouldn't have.
Yeah. It's a good
recognized.
listen. Well, and that's kind of my approach with some of these as well, is you can hear things in it. You can hear things going on in there that you couldn't hear previously.
Right.
And so it kind of serves the same sort of thing, even if it's not what I call definitive
Right.
by any stretch. Of
See, the problem is these give me stuff I don't already have in an annoying fashion. I want it in a good fashion first. Then if you want to mess it up, go
Right.
ahead. I got my good stuff, you know?
Yeah, well, true. But that kind of gives you an idea of that's what I would call remixing.
Yeah.
That's not what is generally referred to as remixing.
Right.
What's generally referred to as remixing is more like a little less conversation and that kind of stuff, where they add a bunch of stuff. But we're going to get to that. We're not quite there yet. Now we're going to talk about things that happened just after, well, actually the year I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And is this from that 1980s?
Yeah, they're both from 1980.
Beautiful. Okay, so my first album was, one of the people on my first album was David Briggs.
Yep.
And Unfinished Business has David Briggs. He was a wealth of information. He talked about Elvis doing the We Had It All.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about 12th of Never and how it leaked to a bootlegger before, because he wanted to get a couple of fans' opinion before it went out, and they ended up just running with it, which he's really regretted. Then he talked about the time that he found out that Elvis knew that he was dating Linda Thompson.
Ah, I bet that was fun.
Yeah. And he goes, "Oh, I wonder if Elvis knows." And he goes, ladies and gentlemen, David Briggs." And then Elvis unplugs his piano. He goes, "Well, I guess he knows." And so that was pretty hilarious. Anyway, so in 1980, and this has a point, I promise. In 1980, Felton Jarvis, actually, these Elvis performances had been previously released, but his voice was somewhat in the background, with strings and voices being predominant. Well, some of
That's absolute bullshit.
yeah. I appreciate the opportunity to enable all who loved him to hear these wonderful vocals. As you listen, it seems as though Elvis has re-recorded these songs today. Also bullshit. But actually, the vocals are as originally performed. I know that Elvis would love it, and we certainly hope that you do.
I think that's also BS, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. Public performance clearance. Be my accept. Clean up your own backyard in loving arms. ASCAP. Special thanks to Jerry Reed for his guitar. So one thing that's really cool. So this was done at Young and Sound in Nashville, Tennessee. Engineer was Chip Young. Stan Dacus is well. Actually, you've got some of the information.
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. One of the things that's interesting about these sessions is that a lot of artists that played with Elvis on his actual sessions came back and were on this album too, including David Briggs, Larry London, Mike Leach, Chip Young. And then we've got a lot of guys who are not with Elvis too, like Dale Sellers, Robert Thompson. Tony Joe White plays harmonica on one. That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
So you've got a mix of Elvis studio veterans and people who never played with Elvis.
Yeah.
And what Felton was trying to do, as he says on the back, is take Elvis's vocal and make an album that sounds like 1980.
Yeah.
That could have been an Elvis album, as if he'd gone into the studio then to record an album.
And more in the country vein, hence the pictures. There was a concerted effort to try and think, hey, let's put these in a new context.
Right.
And it's not a bad idea, especially since you're using people that worked in that's half people that worked with Elvis, Felton Jarvis, who worked extensively with Elvis and knew, was one of Elvis's favorite people, was heavily involved, spearheaded the project, etc., etc. So this is as close as you could get to original without being original.
What I think this
As a concept.
Yeah, sure. What I think this shows more than anything is that Elvis was not there when they were making this.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Because like one of the things that's really important about Elvis, and we talk about this a lot, but it goes missed by most of the public, is that Elvis was not just a singer, but a producer.
He was.
And all of the instruments that he had in the studio with him, the musicians that he selected to play those instruments, and the way that it was arranged when it finally came out reflected Elvis's sensibility.
Mm-hmm.
Here you've got a lot of the same musicians. You got the same songs. You've got his voice on them.
Yep.
But it does not at all reflect Elvis's sensibility.
Right.
And that's why I freaking hate this album. And I hate the outtakes too. Like, I find this unlistenable, even though I had a copy of it when I was a kid as well.
Yeah. I think Guitar Man is fine. Like the main Guitar Man is fine.
With all the when you gonna get
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
I don't blame you. It's I don't listen to it often.
Yeah.
But it doesn't completely scratch my ears out when I hear it. I will say that I don't think it's a coincidence that when FTD put this out, they called it Too Much. The title that they picked was Too Much Monkey Business.
Right.
It is one of the songs that they recorded. So
Yeah.
and
that's like
it describes it very likely describes what most fans and honestly, including myself, and I would expect them as well, who put this together, to describe the sessions about as well as
it describes the aesthetic of the album, frankly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Now, this Too Much Monkey Business, the FTD, I don't believe is in print anymore, which is fine. This is not everything.
Right.
This is not everything that they recorded. They said it was, but it's not. This is not everything that they recorded. I love the artwork. The artwork's great.
Yeah.
And you know what? As a sort of farewell to the collaboration of that group, I can appreciate what this is and what it's trying to be.
Yeah.
For them trying to kind of go on and because you also have to remember, and we remember because we were extremely young. I was there. In 1980, because that was the year I was born, but that aesthetic continued on.
Right.
There was a concerted effort with media, with personalities, with all of this kind of stuff. Honestly, if you think some of the stuff that's said about Elvis now is bad, I could honestly say it was worse then, because every single time his name was brought up, it's not just people in a comment section saying stuff. It was everybody. If any time that I swear, any time that they went to someplace that was an Elvis event, the media would find the most oddball, the least representative portion, the least representative people there. They find the people that say, "Oh yeah, I bought Elvis's toenail from," they would find the people that
there used to be guys sitting at the side of the road selling gallon jugs of water that were labeled as Elvis sweat. It's those type of people.
They'd either find the hucksters, or they would find the people who could be victimized by those hucksters, and they definitely. There was a concerted effort to portray Elvis and his fans as a bunch of freaks.
Yeah.
Full stop. Nothing, not up to the line, not we're going to dance around maybe. No, they're all freaks. They're all not worth your time. You laugh at these morons. That's it. And so if I was somebody who had worked with Elvis for a long time and knew Elvis, My first thought would be, oh God, after I pants every last one of these freaking morons,
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna have me some fun. And so I can understand the effort by Felton and Jerry Reed and a lot of the other people. They were like, no, screw you people. Elvis still has relevance. He was one of the biggest names ever in show business.
Absolutely.
And we're gonna frickin' prove it. We're gonna make an album taking old vocals and make it sound contemporary, because Elvis is still now, even though he's been gone for 3 years. I understand all of that. I'm not saying that the result was marvelous, but I understand where it came from.
I understand the impulse, but I think almost every attempt to make Elvis sound contemporary winds up aging very poorly.
Of course it does.
Because what's the greatness of Elvis's original recordings is that they sort of stand outside of time.
Yes.
They are so much their own thing
Yeah.
that they're not bogged down by genre convention or the expectations of fashion.
Sure.
Or
Totally.
things that change, you know?
Yep.
Like, they will be what they are 100 years from now, in the same way that Hank Williams' records are.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. At that time, with that concerted effort, though, I think that's where a lot of this impulse comes from.
I completely agree with that. I do agree.
And like, it was a reaction to a reaction. And the other thing I would say is,
I think that's a very generous interpretation, but I will allow it. As in, you could also, if you're a cynical person, say this is just a way for them to keep selling new Elvis records, you know?
possibly, but I have firsthand knowledge in a roundabout way of why that's not true, and I'll tell you.
All right.
Okay. So I told you guys about David Briggs, who's on this. I told you about David Briggs earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So, right around 1980, they were doing this. David Briggs said he was watching television, and all of these people were raving about this amazing group that had a sound that was different, was so good, and it was the Stray Cats.
Wow.
David Briggs looked at the television, and he told me, this is from his lips to my ears, but across the room, because otherwise no, I'm just kidding around. He was sitting on the couch, and he told me, he said, man, he goes, I saw that, and I saw all the girls screaming and I saw all this kind of stuff, and he was like, screw that, I know the original.
Yeah,
and he goes,
exactly.
The original is like, it's like, these people need to know what Elvis was like. But he knew, and that kind of gets us into this here in a little bit. He knew that, people are used to a wider separated stereo sound, something with more punch than maybe what was around in the 50s. Something that was basically, so his idea was, you know what? People need to hear Elvis in a fidelity that's more like what they're accustomed to now.
Right.
So he brought in Scotty and DJ and the Jordanaires, and that was the impetus for the I Was the One album.
Right.
Is David Briggs watching the television going, screw those guys, everybody needs to see Elvis again, apparently.
Right.
And so he says, that's why I say it's a reaction to a reaction. And I think this comes from the same place.
And I think that I Was the One album works a lot better than this does.
Well, sure, because they're not being told to play it differently.
Exactly.
They're just said they were basically told, just do what you do, do what you know how to do.
You're following the same arrangements. You just have greater fidelity.
Yeah.
Like, one of the issues with a lot of the Guitar Man arrangements for me is that, Elvis was very good about kind of shaping the music to sort of support the vocal in expressing what the lyrics mean.
Sure.
And I think there are often disconnects between the feel of what the lyrics are going for and what the music is expressing in Guitar Man.
Oh, completely. It's basically what they did. I know exactly what they did because I don't say I know exactly what they did. I would almost place bets on what they did because, again, going back to my first album. So I went into, there was a record producer. I went into a record producer. This was 2002. It was early 2002. And because I had this idea of doing songs that were either songs that inspired Elvis or songs that from artists that inspired Elvis, because I was kind of branching out and finding my own sort of path.
Right.
So when you do that, you kind of like, I knew where I knew where my center was. I'm kind of reaching out from that center point.
Right.
Right. So we went to this producer, and he's like, well, if it's going to be a country record, you're going to need a fiddle, and you're going to need this and this and then banjo and da da da. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. I said, I want to do the Studio B sound.
Right.
And well, that's not country. Like, I don't care about that.
It's countrypolitan.
It's country. Exactly. Yeah. It's older country than his ass knew. And he was an older guy. I didn't get it. And but he was, the mentality that he had, and he played some songs for us.
Mm-hmm.
This was like, and the songs that he suggested, if he was going to be a part of it, this is the kind of stuff we were going to do. And this was basically like, it's like those story songs from like Garth Brooks and things. And Garth Brooks is fine, I guess, but I have no interest. I never have. Like,
it's just not your kind of thing.
Yeah, like then or now.
Right.
It's like, like it was stuff like Don't Take the Girl.
The dance.
Yeah. Ugh. I mean, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. It was, oh my God. But see, that's the mentality. And that was 2002.
Right.
That mentality had been hovering around Nashville since around this time.
Oh, yeah.
So I guarantee you what happened was, so Felton and them, they kind of had, they knew what they wanted to do.
Right.
Let's see if we've got here.
They went full Nashville. Elvis never went full Nashville.
Elvis never went full Nashville. Let's see. Assistant engineer, mastering, re-recorded at Young and Sound. It doesn't say art direction. Does it say lettering? Bill Noss? No. Anyway, what I was looking for was to see. Now it says produced by Felton Jarvis. I have a feeling there were RCA people present.
Yeah.
That were saying, well, if you want it to be today's sound, you're going to need this kind of a vibe.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's the same produced stuff. It's the same produced stuff that George Strait rejected. It's the same kind of produced stuff that a lot of these people rejected, but was conventional wisdom at the time.
Right.
And it was still conventional wisdom in 2002 when we were like, oh, thank you very much. We're going to leave now. And funny enough, Dad recorded one of that guy's songs because it was kind of, it was sentimental and he wanted to do it. And Dad did a fine job. But other than that, I'm like, no, let's get the heck out of Dodge. And then after that, we met with Ray. Then after that, we met Ray Walker.
Right.
And he got me in touch with the gentleman who did stuff for Brenda Lee, and so that studio, and that's like so there's something Walker sound. Anyway, but like, so I can tell you that has to be where a lot of this came from.
Right.
There had to have been like some A&R person that was directing to a certain degree. There's just no way.
Right.
Because Felton Jarvis had to have, unless there was something that he was listening to at the time that was just so different that he just thought, oh, well, that's modern. We need to do that.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it past him, but I don't know.
I don't know either, but having had those experiences when we were doing Unfinished Business, definitely leads me down that other path.
Right.
But that is why I say it's a reaction to a reaction, because I don't think Felton was like, how can we sell more Elvis records?
But people at RCA were definitely.
Oh, of course they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, but their idea of that, if you look at their idea of that, was very different. Their idea of that in 1980, we also got the silver box, or was it the golden celebration?
Oh, they were open to any avenue that might sell more Elvis records.
Sure.
They would do the archival releases. They would do these releases that we just talked about that are revisionist, and they would do extremely revisionist releases. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that they didn't do this very much.
That's the only time.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, that's what I mean.
Until much later.
Well, sure.
Now,
and this did decently well.
yeah.
Charting, sales, and all of that. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if it was just sales driven, there would have been more of these.
Also, the original concept was it was going to be a duet album with a lot of the artists who had originally recorded it, like Carl Perkins, like Tony Joe White, and those duet vocals were recorded.
Really?
Yes, but were not used for whatever reason.
Interesting.
So maybe it did well, but not well enough for them to do a follow-up that was planned, I think.
Okay.
I don't really know about this album much because it's not one of my favorites.
Right. It would be fascinating to delve more into that.
Yes.
And if we can find more information, I don't know where we would go at this point. But
it's out there. Yeah, people
yeah.
have researched it. It's just not. It has not been an area of emphasis for me.
Sure.
But it wasn't the only kind of remixes that were done in 1980.
Mm-hmm.
The soundtrack for the Warner documentary, This Is Elvis, also features some revisionist remixes that involve. This is kind of like halfway between the other two things that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
They do use original recordings, sometimes different mixes of original recordings, but they add additional instruments. Mm-hmm. There are strings added to Merry Christmas Baby.
Yeah.
There's a whole different like string arrangement on Always on My Mind that
was that new?
For this one it is. It's not the same one that was on the Always on My Mind disc.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a revisionist mix.
Interesting.
And they also overdubs new instruments over the television performances to try to make the sound quality a little more dynamic and exciting.
Yeah, well, and especially since you're going to be mixing songs from the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
It helps it blend.
Yeah, it helps kind of get a little bit more of a sameness. And, and this is, I would say, comparable in ways, even though it's not Elvis's original group. I would say this is comparable in ways to the I Was the One album.
I agree.
Because they're keeping to the original structure. They're keeping to the original arrangement.
Right.
Well, in the 50s cases.
For the most part.
Yeah.
Like even the later stuff, it's not as egregious as what Felton was doing, obviously.
Yeah.
I think this is maybe a little more egregious than the I Was the One album. But I think stuff like I Was the One that adds new instruments and This Is Elvis that adds new instruments in some cases. And I would even say like the London Symphony Orchestra album, which is new instrumentation in the background. It's still very respectful of Elvis's arrangement.
Sure.
So it doesn't sound like somewhere his voice doesn't belong.
Right.
It's and I think for the most part the remixes on some of these things kind of work.
They do.
Do I prefer them to the originals? Almost in every case, no.
Yeah.
And but like it's not bad to have that representing Elvis. Now, some of the London Symphony Orchestra stuff is a little bit better than others.
Sure.
But and they actually did some interesting stuff on that. Like I'm pretty sure their version of Bridge Over Troubled Water blends the studio master vocal with some of the live August of 70 pieces as well.
I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure that it does.
I hardly listened to that one. I wasn't as much a fan. I liked the Christmas one, actually.
Right.
I like that one better.
Is that the one where they do the duets?
I don't remember.
I don't like the duet albums, but that's a different.
Oh no.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like the. I think there might be a duet, but I'm just and if there is, I tend to skip those.
Yeah, I don't own the London Symphony Orchestra album for a reason.
Yeah, I don't own the original. I own the Christmas one.
Okay.
I actually liked the Christmas one. It's mostly because it's nice to put on while you're decorating the tree.
And I think that's
fine.
Those albums are sort of pitching Elvis to a different audience.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they're okay for what they do. I'm not offended by what they did with it, you know?
Yeah.
Which I am offended by some of the stuff on here. And further remixes. Are we ready to move to the next section?
Close, because we're getting into some of that thing.
All right.
What I would like to see, because as you said, the London Symphony stuff is kind of meant to pitch Elvis to a different crowd. And in some of those cases, it's nice to kind of meet those crowds halfway, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
I would like to see, if we're going to continue down that road with things, honestly, I think that Elvis would sell incredibly well to the people that buy Michael Bublé records. And I think that there are a number of good, solid songs from the 60s that they're not as familiar with.
Yeah.
I find that is like going back to when I was doing the shows, I would get people who would come up to me and they would say, and I'm not even kidding, they would say, "Oh my gosh, I love that song, and I love that kind of Hawaiian song in the middle with the stops. What's that? Oh, Stop Where You Are?" They were like, "I love that song. Where's that?" Not even kidding. I'm not kidding. They would come to me. They'd never enjoyed Elvis before in their lives, and they're coming up to me asking about "Stop Where You Are." I am not even kidding. That's not a joke. That's dead serious. And I'd be like, "Oh, okay. Well, I mean, but you want the Paradise Hawaiian style soundtrack for that, and then you go for the double features and da 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 da." And I would always tell, "Okay, here's go to shopelvis.com or go to whatever, because Amazon really wasn't a thing then. So go to shopelvis.com. This is the CD that you want. It's track 5 or whatever." And so I think that it's about the presentation and the context. And if you give people something that surprises them, that they've not heard, they're like, "Oh, that's Elvis? Holy crap!" So it's a sin. Like a lot of something for everybody potluck around that kind of stuff.
Sure.
If you took those and gave them more, not going that far, because I think sometimes they're a little, some of the earlier stuff that I'm thinking of his is a little samey, but more of a Michael Bublé-esque mix as opposed to an orchestral straight up mix could be a really different album and refreshing album in a sense.
Elvis was a fantastic crooner.
Absolutely.
And there's definitely an audience for that. You could even use a lot of the movie tracks.
It's true.
Like "I Need Somebody to Lean On,"
That's like screaming for a Michael Bublé-esque album.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. Totally.
And as long as you're respectful to Elvis's arrangement, the way that he did it, you can embroider around the edges.
Exactly.
But you can't have it sound like something that he wouldn't have done.
Right.
Yeah. Because that just...
Well, there are ways to do that to make it sound lush.
And I was going to say there are exceptions to the rule I just laid down, but we'll get into that.
Yeah. Now, in that realm of what we're sort of talking about, there have been people that have done individual things. There's a CD called Elvis: The New Recordings, which I am slightly familiar with. I don't own it, so apologies. Called The New Recordings, where they basically they've just kind of done sparse overdubs over top of things, and it's interesting. And I know that
is that a Sony release, an official release, or is this a fan thing?
I think it's licensed.
Okay.
The person that puts it out is I mean, it's an incredibly personal project to them, and they're very protective of that. And no disrespect, I thought they were fine. I don't necessarily prefer them to the originals, but
Right.
but they're perfectly fine. And for the people that enjoy that, that's totally cool. But yeah, I'm just giving that as another example of that. So that kind of describes these kinds of things. Now, I'm I'm going to. We're not quite here yet.
We're not quite here yet.
Not
There's
quite
some
here yet.
more ground we got to cover
So
first.
back
Yeah.
here is the Elvis 30 number one hits. This was in stores for those of you that don't know. This was in stores and they had CDs of Elvis 30 number one hits in the rack for you to like pull out to purchase and all this kind of thing. I think this was from a Sam Goody.
Sounds right.
Yeah, and I've got two of these, and I've got two of the Second to Nones. That's the one of the Second to Nones is over there, so incredibly popular. And I will say I do really enjoy this. Is the remix for A Little Less Conversation that was on 30 number one hits?
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as far as like a dance club type of a thing,
Right.
and I will say, I know a number of people that were like, whoa, that's Elvis?
Yeah.
And it brought some fans in.
It did, and not only that, but it got a lot of people listening. And because the single also had the original version, I've had friends that got into it because of the remix, and then they're like, you know what, the Elvis recording's a lot better.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why you never know. I have a really hard time disparaging things that maybe are not to my taste, but might draw people in. Specifically because I've watched stuff that I'm like, what the heck? And it was like, I love that. And now I buy all this up. It's like, you know what? Cool.
Right.
And then I've also watched other people who have disparaged things. For instance, like when I was doing the tribute performances, and a lot of people, I mean, to be honest, us included, have said not been real fans of large parts of the way the tribute world is handled, and yet we know that fans are drawn. I know from personal experience, fans were made through that experience.
Sure. Absolutely.
They came up again. They stop where you are. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And they ask about the different stuff. They ask about the stuff that's unique,
Right.
and that's why I always put different stuff in the show. So I have a hard. I'm as time has gone on, I've been less and less disparaging of stuff that I don't like. In terms of does it have worth? Because if it has worth in the sense of bringing somebody to Elvis, I'm cool with it.
And one of the things that I think makes the Junkie XL remix succeed better than some of the subsequent remixes, like there was the Oakenfold remix of Rubberneck, and there were a couple of more at the same time. The Oakenfold was one of my lesser.
I agree.
But
But DNA Project
Right.
Was really good, and Joseph's.
Yeah, Joseph's was great.
Joseph's was good. The DNA Project one actually shares a lot in common with Joseph's.
That's
I don't know.
interesting.
I don't know if you've ever heard the DNA Project one.
Was that one of the ones that was like an iTunes exclusive for a while?
I think so.
Yeah, I think I maybe have heard that.
Okay. Because if you don't, I'll play it for you. I'll find it and I'll play it for you.
There's what I think is to Junkie XL's credit is that he not only makes his song out of it, but he also uses elements of the original recording instrumentationally. you
Yes.
know. And I think when you carry over the instruments, you're allowing Elvis to be a collaborator.
Sure.
And it's a more authentic experience in
Sure.
a weird way.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that we'll talk about when we get to the Lerman
Yeah.
soundtrack, which did it better than anyone else has ever done it. But yeah, I think that is sort of that's maybe a key to having a good Elvis remix if you're gonna do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because on the other hand, we have stuff like Viva Elvis.
Which is very, very hit or miss.
I thought at the time I thought like I was hearing these things. I was like, is this okay? I mean, this is kind of listenable, right? That's very different. Now, when I listen to those, I think they've aged like milk. Like it is, the expiry date is clear on those things.
I think it depends. I think it's a case by case basis myself. I think it's a case by case basis because I do think give me one sec. I do think that the Bossa Nova Baby I
I have
still
no memory of what that one sounds
okay.
like.
I
Yeah.
still enjoy the Bossa Nova Baby one. The
I'm thinking specifically of the King Creole remix, which I think is loathsome.
oh yeah. I actually yeah. I still rather enjoy that one.
If you listen, have you listened to it like in the last 5 years?
I used to use it to work out too.
We're gonna listen to it and we're gonna
Okay.
see what you think of it
Okay.
now. All right, now here's the thing, right? These things existing on their own, that's just fine. I had quite a shocking experience when I went to Graceland recently. They have an introductory video that's supposed to introduce you to Elvis before you go on the tour. It shows clips from the '68 special in Aloha visually, no
Okay.
audio, and has little facts about Elvis's career. The only music you hear in the entire thing are the Viva Elvis remixes,
Really?
which now sound far more dated than Elvis's original recordings.
Wow.
It-
Wow.
It's like,
And that's actually doubly surprising considering that they own the rights to use like Aloha and '68 Comeback.
they could use actual clips if they wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the video up there,
Right.
but the audio is all the Elvis remixes. Even when
Weird.
they're showing video of Elvis singing Burnin' Love on Aloha, it's the Burning Love Viva Elvis remix that's playing.
Oh wow.
That's
a corporate decision right there.
That is an awful corporate decision because it seems like you're pre-apologizing for a product you do not believe in.
Oh wow. I will say it can be very hard to kind of keep a pulse on things, and in those kind of cases it's probably better just to sort of not.
It's a horrible fellow kids moment.
Yeah.
EPE, if you're watching this, if you want somebody to redo your intro video for free, I'll do it. I'll do it for free. I'll come up with something 10 times better than that.
I think it's another one of those context things. No, I'll tell you why. There was a CD that came out, or an album that came out a while back called the Ultimate Party Album, and it has a few. It has like Burnin' Love and Bossa Nova Baby, and I think it has King Creole, but then it's mixed with like Viva Las Vegas and the original Viva Las Vegas and the original Party and the original Jaws Rock. In that context, I think it plays better because that's the context I'm more familiar with it in.
Okay.
So it's not like, so if you heard like, I don't know, like what there's like, I think there's like a duet of like Can't Help Falling in Love or something like that. Like some of those other things that are in between the stronger stuff stronger. I mean, comparatively.
Right.
Weaken the weaker material weakens the not as weak material.
See, I feel like that's down there on the tier with the Guitar Man album because both least represent Elvis's aesthetic.
Well, sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And like there's no place I'd never bought a copy of Viva Elvis. I heard it plenty of times on Sirius XM. I never felt the need to purchase it. No one has ever told me they thought it sounded cool. As a matter of fact, quite a few non-Elvis fans have said exactly the opposite, and I have heartily agreed with them.
I would have liked to have seen the show because perhaps it has a different vibe after, like, sometimes the movie soundtracks are better in their own context, like within the context of the film, than they are outside. Perhaps that's the case. I have no idea.
I'm just going to tell you, and you can bleep this if you want to. I don't care if the person who did those remixes is watching the show. You did a f***ing terrible job. Do I think I could have done better? Yes.
Send your responses to John Michael Heath. It's like, yeah. So it's one of those things where some of those I still think that aren't bad in certain contexts. Like I said, using them to work out is, it's got enough energy that I can work out to it.
Should we throw the Peloton remixes into this conversation as well?
They're better. They're better. They're not great, but they're better.
I put them in the same kind of. Oh, here, look, let me put it this way. In 3 years, the Peloton remixes will sound as dated as the Viva Elvis stuff sounds now. Okay. Are they better? Like right now, they're better because the expiration date hasn't arrived yet. But brother, it is coming, and it's coming fast.
Hey, at least they remixed stuff like Catching on Fast.
And like that's
and Clean Up Your Own Backyard and stuff that's like, at least they went for rare stuff.
That is another benefit of, like, that's being a little creative.
Yeah.
Now I shiver to think of the Clean Up Your Own Backyard remix. I understand what they're trying to do.
Right.
I f***ing hate it. I also
content warning.
All right, what was the other? There's Catching on Fast, Clean Up Your Own Backyard, and there's a third one.
I don't.
Right.
I don't know, and that should tell us. that should the fact that neither one of us can remember.
I know.
Should tell you everything.
And I actually, like, for doing Catching on Fast, like, I was not all that familiar with the song before the remix, and it got me appreciating the song more. So
yeah,
there you go. It did something.
It's funny. The remixes sounded better on. I remember the first time I heard them. Mm-hmm. I was just like, oh, this is just bad. And it's funny, and then I turned around and I played them for Rhonda, and I liked them better the second time around. I think I don't know what I was expecting, but it's like, again, it's like one of those, like, you know, if you bite into if you bite into a mango and you're expecting an orange or something, you know, it's like, whoa, what the heck is this, right?
Right.
Once you kind of get, okay, now I get what they're going for, and then you're kind of along for the ride a little better, and also it should be noted that these were directly made for somebody to be on a treadmill or whatever.
Yeah, I know.
So it's not you know,
the bar is low.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like it's made for people to move to, and that's it. I think with some slight tweaks, they would be kind of interesting looks from more contemporary artists at songs that are not hits.
I want to also say to EPE and Sony, if sometimes you're offered things, it's okay to say no. It's not necessary to constantly make contemporary Elvis's sound. Like, you know, other legends often, I guess, would be offered stuff like this and probably have said no. We have never seen a ska album of Hank Williams Sr. Or, you know, like... They don't do a lot with a lot of other people. Now, maybe that's because Elvis is not is a much bigger name than a lot of these other guys.
Well, yeah.
But maybe it's also because they're okay saying no to things.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. It is. I will say that, you know, if you're in the seat of being responsible for wanting to see things grow, I can see how it would be very tough to look at opportunities and think, well, gosh, you know, it might work. And
honestly though, I think the level of interest in Elvis before this most recent movie is kind of a judgment on how they've managed that, which I would say is not well.
Possibly, but at the same time, I mean, you know,
It's easy to nitpick in hindsight.
Yeah.
It's harder to make the right decisions beforehand.
That was kind of, yeah.
But you're going to be judged on those decisions one way or another.
Yeah.
Like, hindsight does offer the judgment.
If you get used to saying no,
would you be open to saying yes to something like this?
Yep. And then you miss out on that.
Right.
You know, and so it is a damned if they do, damned if they don't, to a degree. I mean, you know, we have our own idea.
I think it's where they have damned bad judgment most of the time.
Well, but it's. I mean, like I said, well, like you just said, it's easy to see that. And there's a ton of stuff that we've had long conversations about
Right.
what they should have been doing since the '80s.
Right. And I will say, I'm not criticizing anyone specific here. I know a lot of these decisions are made by committee, which oftentimes is the problem.
Right.
So I'm not casting aspersions at EPE, at Sony.
Right.
We're talking about the they that exist in everyone's imagination, right?
Right. Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about this most recent album of remixes, which I think far surpasses every other attempt to remix Elvis in the heavily revisionist sense.
So I would say this goes even further than Viva Elvis.
Right.
And it's one of those things where it goes so far that it almost comes back around.
Well, it does, but... Well, I'll let you continue this point first. Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
Viva Elvis, one of the things that I thought was interesting as a nerd about Viva Elvis. So, like, so before Viva Elvis came along, my idea of remixes, at least in the modern sense, not in the traditional sense, my idea of that was steeped in they took an Elvis song and they added a bunch of stuff.
Right.
One thing that Viva Elvis did that I, as a nerd, I really appreciated was the fact that they would take a bunch of little clips and snippets and pieces of stuff that was from totally different songs.
Right.
And I was like, wow, that's really inspired. That's from that. And they made that fit. That's really cool. I mean, on that level, I really enjoyed it because it was different. It was a different approach. And it took the idea of collaborating all of these differing little pieces from the If You Think I Don't Need You saxophone solo with Bossa Nova Baby. And I was like, wow, that's the sax solo from the, and the more you listen to it, the more you hear all these little pieces from all these songs that make this sort of thing sort of congeal together to varying greater or lesser degrees. Your mileage may vary. So it kind of broke the mold in my head about what to expect with the remix, which was interesting. Then we get to this, and it takes that aesthetic and goes to Mach 11.
Right.
But I think the difference is that with the Baz Luhrmann, you've got people involved that, because I do know that the Cirque folks had some ideas about what Elvis was. They went with the traditional approach.
Right.
They had an idea of what Elvis was, and they made a show with that idea.
Right.
And I don't want to disparage anybody at Cirque. I will simply say that there's a reason that the Beatles show is still playing and the Elvis show is not.
Right.
Because when you have the people involved who were there, it's much easier to make something that is has a certain aesthetic, but also maintains some of the artistic integrity of the original.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you bring that up
because
before that, I was thinking that the reason this was successful and that was not is that this uses lots of pieces of Elvis's actual recordings. So you carry over some of his aesthetic as a producer and he becomes more of a full-time collaborator. But as you're pointing out, that did happen to an extent in the Viva Elvis as well.
It's pretty extensive. Like the amount of differing pieces.
Perhaps. Perhaps the real difference is the other half of the collaboration besides Elvis in this is more competent and artistic.
I'm sure that's the case, but I think there's a more personal reason.
Okay.
Because with Viva Elvis, I believe the Cirque folks had an idea of Elvis and wanted to push that.
Right.
In this case, yes, they're using Colonel Parker, but they're telling Elvis's story and to a degree the Colonel's.
Right.
So while they did have a not entirely and not entirely historically accurate presentation in mind. They wanted to, at least on some level, they wanted to meet Elvis where he was more so.
Right.
Because Boz spent years doing research. He went down to Tupelo and talked to people. He went through a lot of different things. And I would imagine that the music producer for the person that was the musical director for this did a similar thing or went off of what Boz was saying.
Right.
And the vision was very specific, but it was more Elvis centric and less this is what we think he was.
Well, I actually,
in the general tone, like they're trying to
thinking about this in a little slightly different way.
Sure.
I think what the Viva Elvis remixes do is they try to drag Elvis to a certain modern aesthetic.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas whoever produced this, at the very least, had an ear for the expressive potentialities that exist in the Elvis recordings, and was able to recontextualize them in ways that shine new light on the original performances. Right?
Yep. Agreed.
Because like when you've got stuff like we've talked about with Craw Fever,
I love that.
it's very different than either Crawfish or Fever.
It is.
But it uses parts of both of them in ways that are brilliant.
Yeah.
Like it shows different levels of emotion that are already in Elvis's voice.
Yeah.
That in a new context makes it work in a completely different way.
It does. On a whole other kind of,
And there's not just Craw Fever. You've got like I like the duet version of Power of My Love with Elvis and Jack White. It's the hardest rock thing you've ever heard Elvis in, but he sounds completely like in his place. Like he's supposed to be there, you know?
Funny enough, that's one of the ones that doesn't work as well for me.
I think it works very well. I also like the Tame Impala remix of Edge of Reality.
Yes.
I think that like they just used ideas to make a completely new song.
Yeah.
And use Elvis in the process as well, but it works.
It does.
Well.
Yeah. It's a like you said, it's a recontextualization that tries to that I think does a better job. Well, and part of it's also because it's a movie.
Yeah.
So it's not they're not thinking about how do the circus performers fit into this.
Right.
They're thinking of how does this forward Elvis's narrative.
Right.
And so that's a different approach that has to be taken.
Right.
So I mean, sure they sold the soundtrack, but it's because they spent a lot of time on Viva Elvis, and they thought, and you know what? Again, I will say that some of those work quite well in certain contexts. Again, like working out and all this kind of stuff. This was made to be a listening experience because there's an emotion that must be driven.
Right.
And so what they've done is somebody who has a great musical aesthetic takes that and finds where Elvis is, and also is listening for where that can be to drive an emotional narrative.
And I'll tell you one of the things I really like about the Power of My Love, the Elvis and Jack White thing, is that Jack approaches the song from almost like a metal punk rock angle.
Yeah.
But he keeps some of the horns from the Elvis recording.
He does.
He keeps the backing vocals, which are not things that you think of when you think of that genre.
Right.
But it's very Elvis.
It is.
And it keeps Elvis firmly in a fitting surrounding.
Yeah.
Right. Even with the new context.
Yeah. To me, it's a little fast just because I like the sultry. I mean,
right. It's see. Here's the thing. It's not the master recording.
Right.
It doesn't have the same level of sex appeal.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same level of swagger. It has a different kind of swagger.
Yeah, but it's more manic and.
But it like I was surprised to think, Elvis doesn't sound out of place here. It works.
That's it. Well, I think part of it's because I'm used to what what vocals sound like when they're sped up or slowed down.
Right.
So all I can hear is the artifacts that come from speeding him up too much.
There's a little bit of that. There is a little bit of that.
And also it loses some, like there's
Well, you have the reverse of that in Craw Fever when they slow down.
yeah, but here's the you do, but in that instance, that adds to that doesn't that like what the if they could have sped Elvis's voice up without having those artifacts in Power of My Love, they would have done it, and it would have been to its, you know, there's nothing added by those artifacts. Those artifacts are actually on purpose. Like if those didn't exist and they had to add them, they very well would have, because the idea of that moment is this sort of darkness and this sort of like this I don't want to say foreboding, but there's like an underbelly to that. There's like a caution, a danger, because like here's an example. When I did the song "No One" on my first album, so as a demo, I took Ray Charles's version of No One, and this is just to let the musicians know the basic idea of what I wanted it to sound like,
Right.
for not for the arrangement exactly, but the general gist and the idea. So I pitched the Ray Charles version down, and the girls sound like guys.
Right.
And Ray was like, "Do you want us to sound exactly like that? Because I don't know if we can do that." I was like, no. Those are actually girls. I just pitched it down.
Yeah.
He didn't realize, because he said it, he goes, "We don't sound like those guys.
Yeah.
They're not guys, they're girls." But when you pitch the vocals down, and also, for instance, this is also done in post-production. For instance, Superman the Animated Series, the voice actor the first voice actor for Darkseid, they pitch his voice down. So so that way, instead of this kind of sound, you get this kind of. So it has that kind of.
Yeah, I understand.
So it has that kind of. It sounds evil, like it's darker.
You would get that from lowering it without the artifacting, though. You would still get the effect, I think.
Oh yeah, well, but what I'm saying though is the artifacting from lowering the pitch. Like like if Elvis was singing into that pitch, it would not have that effect.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know that the artifacting is an expressive tool. We'll just have to agree to disagree on this. So before
it doesn't distract from it at the very least.
Oh, I will agree with that. I don't think it distracts from it in the Jack White either. But that's like we're just gonna have to agree to disagree.
Right.
I also like what they did with Cotton Candy Land, even though it's not performed by Elvis. It's nice the way they used it.
And it's funny, like when you think of Cotton Candy Land, I mean, I just think of it in the context of the film, and I never thought about it. It's like, wow, in the context of Colonel Parker, that's fascinating.
It is. It's a good use of it.
It's genius.
And there's always been kind of a creepy undertone to that song, and they used that. Pushed it to the max.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. And they use okay, Don't Fly Away. That is the Any Day Now remix.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. Don't Fly Away and Suspicious Minds they're good. They're not they don't necessarily blow me away, but it's funny how certain recontextualizations don't, and this is subjective, everybody's going to have their own opinion, how sometimes they just don't seem to work, and in other cases, like, wow, it's the same kind of different, but it's okay, and it doesn't grate on my nerve, right?
I think
those are, even the ones that I don't like as well,
I think everything on this is at least interesting.
It is,
yeah, and that's more than I can say for a lot of attempts at remixing Elvis.
Oh, completely,
yeah,
totally. Like, I know a lot of folks like there was a guy that did a bunch of Elvis remixes. I think he did a Baby Let's Play House or a Baby I Don't Care or something like that. And I'm Spankox or something.
Oh yeah.
Some of those were all right. The fact that I can hardly remember any of them is probably saying something as far as how I enjoyed them. If any of these are ones that you enjoyed, let us know in the comments. Again, this is
If you have
this
a
is
favorite
conversation, not a monologue.
Yeah, if you have a favorite remix that we haven't mentioned, let us know.
Yeah, you know, because there have been like scatterings of decent things before, but I think Spankox did like Little Sister and a bunch of other things that
I vaguely remember those.
didn't really grab me.
Yeah, I'd say the only two remixes that from way back when that I still remember what they sound like are the Junkie XL.
Yep.
And Joseph's "Come On Everybody" remix.
Oh yeah. I like that. The Elvis medley.
The Elvis medley is also a remix.
That's the Elvis medley. Kind of goes back a few steps.
Right. That's way far.
That's more like This Is Elvis or that kind of thing, but I think that works pretty well. It was really popular when it came out.
That's an interesting novelty. It's not something that I would revisit on purpose.
Sure.
But like if I hear it on the radio, I might listen to it to say, "Oh yeah, that's how that went."
Yeah. Right. I mean, when I hear it, I smile because I remember, like, again, I'm not gonna look at a list of stuff and go, I'm gonna play the Elvis medley.
Sure.
But if it comes on, I'm like, oh, cool, yeah, I remember that. That's awesome.
And I will say, like, as far as remixes that I intentionally revisit, I will come back to these.
Totally.
I will listen to these a lot.
Totally.
I'll maybe get out the Junkie XL and the Joseph's once in a while.
Sure. Yeah, the DNA project on Rubberneckin' is quite good. I think it is so close to Joseph's. It's wild.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I'll sometimes come to these things, you know, these revisionist mixes. I really have no problem with revisionist mixes.
Yeah.
But
as long as especially when we have the originals,
gotta have the original masters
to go to, because then it can be a gateway for new fans, and for those of us that have the original mixes or prefer the original mixes, it's a curiosity to revisit every now and again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just kind of like, you know what? I'm in the mood for hearing this song, but punchier.
I own the Too Much Monkey Business CD, even though I don't like the Guitar Man album.
Yeah.
I've listened to it exactly once, and it is sat on my shelf ever since.
Hey.
I own the Guitar Man album.
Yeah.
I've listened to it maybe... I'll tell you what happens with the Guitar Man album.
Yeah.
I will listen to it. I'll forget how much I hate it, and I'll say, what's that like? Oh yeah, this is why I haven't listened to this in a long time. And it goes right back on the shelf until the next time I forget.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
If you know, for the Guitar Man album, there's maybe one or two that I'm like, yeah, that's fun. Right. And if it comes on, I won't change it. The rest of them, I will think about it, changing it.
If given an option, I'll almost certainly listen to the original mix.
Well, yes.
Right?
That's almost but that's true. That's for us. That's true almost entirely across the board. There might be one or two times, and again, it's one of those things where what you are doing changes the context of how you're listening and what you're listening for.
All right. I got an interesting topic for us to close on.
Okay.
So we can end on a positive note. Is there a remix or revisionist mix that you actually prefer to the original master?
No.
Not any one?
No.
I've got one.
Okay.
I think the version that's on the 1969 box set and on some of the FTDs of Don't Cry Daddy, that is mostly undubbed but has the harmony overdub.
Oh.
I prefer that to the master.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean in the context now, because I don't necessarily think of that as I think of that as a different edit.
Right. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's in the same vein.
Yeah, that's just an overdub missing the later overdubs. You know, because like I categorize that differently because the harmony vocal was placed first,
right,
and then the other stuff was added later. So technically, to me, that's a step in the process, not a revisionist mix.
But it's not the master, right?
Right.
And it's not quite the undubbed take.
Sure.
It's the step in the process.
Yeah.
I prefer that to what
Okay.
it eventually became.
That's cool. Yeah.
That's maybe the one instance I would put that. I also prefer the undubbed versions of In the Ghetto to the finished master, but like talking about undubbed stuff is a whole different episode.
Yeah, I see. I kind of classify that a little bit differently.
Right.
I'll tell you, like the closest I would come to having something that I prefer to the original would be, and this will tell you how I classify them differently. Like I think I look at undubs as their own animal. So there's like the main master with overdubs original mix, and then there's the main master with overdubs remixes if any exist.
Right.
And then there's the undubbed, but I don't think of the undubbed as a different mix than the master. It's a different animal.
Okay.
It's a different categorization. So to me, the closest I would come to having something, actually, you know what? My answer of no is incorrect.
I knew there had to be at least one.
Yeah. My answer of no is incorrect. The Harem Scarum soundtrack across the board.
Yeah, I'll agree with. I'll agree with that.
Yeah. The double features across the board, infinitely better. The the mixes of the Speedway soundtrack. There are a number of the soundtracks that sound better. So you know what? That's my answer.
Okay, that's a good answer.
And the closest after that would be the 2000 Promised Land.
I also agree with that one. Although I don't really think I prefer it, but I like it as an alternative.
Sure.
Yeah, I like having both of them.
That's why I say it's close.
Yeah, it's close. Yeah,
It's
I got
close.
you. Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily surpass, but I would say it's. I would.
I like it
probably-
as much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and that's what I mean by the different categorizations, because that is a different mix of the same thing.
Right.
Of exactly the same thing.
Exactly.
Because to me, undubbed and overdubbed undubbed and final masters have different purposes. You
They
know?
do.
I mean, in my head.
Yeah,
that's
they do.
That's the way I compartmentalize them, right?
But all I'm saying is like for the undubbed for those things, or that's like maybe the one time I would second guess Elvis's overdub. You know, because like on most of the stuff that even like a lot of the stuff people complain about, like the Jungle Room session stuff, yeah, maybe it's a little overcooked, but for the most part, I like the finished masters better than the undubbed versions.
Yeah, I would say like for instance for some of that stuff, if you could approach the mix similar to what they did with the 2000 Promised Land, and just a tiny touch, pull back the overdubs, not much, just a tiny little bit, and reduce the amount of reverb and stuff that's on those, so they have a little bit more of a sharp sound.
Right.
And then use the compression use some of the compression that Matt is using on Elvis's voice in the Jungle Room outtakes, without. Well, see, here's the thing. Elvis's voice has so much echo on it on the masters that I would be fascinated to hear the masters from a dry vocal with the echo that Matt chose to use, sitting in the master to see how it sits differently, because we wouldn't know. I'd have a hard time saying no, none of that should be in there, because it's going to sit differently in the master with all of the overdubs involved. I mean, I just want the full session. I mean,
right.
What I'm talking about is separate from that.
No, I got you.
It's its own ball. It's its own baby. But that would be really cool, and I think that would be another case where I would very likely prefer, just because I think that the Moody Blue and from Elvis Presley from Elvis Presley Boulevard, in some cases sound so muddy.
Yeah, they do.
That what he did brought out more of the life of those recordings, and if we kind of split the difference, I think you'd be really onto something.
Yeah. No, I generally agree with all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so pretty interesting, the evolution of remixes, the evolution of remixing just as a definition.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's so many things you can mean when you say remix.
Yeah. And
From the, interesting to the completely obscene. They span the gamut.
from the interesting to the crazy to the really crazy, but somehow works.
Yeah.
And that's our opinion. You guys and gals might have a different idea of what you're into, what you dig, and that's okay.
What's interesting, one final point before we say goodbye.
Sure.
I think this actually comes the closest of all of these to sounding like new Elvis songs.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's
kind of what this was supposed to be.
Yeah.
I think this gets closer.
I'd agree with that. Yeah. I'd agree with that. And and part of it is by the time you and I heard this.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I would say by the time you and I heard this, and we're in any real position to make musical judgments.
Yeah. It was already old hat.
It was already old hat.
Right.
So, I mean, I was born the year these were recorded. So by the time I was aware that this was different stuff, even as a kid, I really didn't gravitate too much toward it, but except for Guitar Band, I liked the title track, but, and for that reason, I still do. I don't hardly ever play it, but it's not something that I revile when I hear it. Right. But by the time I was aware that this was its own baby, it was already like 10 years old.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be, I think this is going to stand up much better in 10 years.
I do too.
I would assume that we'll still be doing this, and 10 years later we can take a look at this and say, what do we think?
Yeah, well, I think people might still come to listen to this even when they're like, even when it's been long enough that they're like, wait, there were Peloton remixes? What?
There's a lot of fans out there that don't even know that Peloton remixes exist.
Go look them up if you dare.
Save that for the Halloween and for the next Halloween episode. I think they're on YouTube. They're definitely on Amazon. So do a search for the Peloton remixes, and I will say, like I said, these are artists. These are like in some cases like hip hop artists and that kind of stuff that have taken a look at Elvis material and picked obscure stuff. Just on dint of that, I have respect.
Yeah.
And that's cool to see. And again, it was made for working out, and it's fine. It's fine for that. I know I'm not really crazy about it in almost any other context, but it's fine for that. And I will say it made me appreciate the idea of remixing catching on fast, even if I maybe wasn't as crazy about that exact.
Hey, and like if you're going to remix a song, dig deep and find one that most people have never heard of.
Exactly.
There's tons of Elvis songs that have the potential to do that you can
true.
do that with,
It's absolutely true. And if anybody that is if any Michael Bublé's people or something, or anybody that has that kind of an idea, grab stuff from the Double Trouble soundtrack, grab stuff from there's so many movie songs, there's so many like stuff from Something for Everybody and Potluck and For the Asking, and there's so much stuff in there and so much potential for the modern easy listening market. Mm-hmm. And that I feel is a shorter jump to get to the main catalog.
Yeah. Definitely.
So there's not as much of that doesn't sound like that remix I heard. It's not that different.
Sure.
They go, oh, cool, that's just more stuff, which is great. So, but either way, we know that a lot of fans, more than we probably realize, found Elvis through some of these things and are now big Elvis fans. And hey, any way it happens, that's cool. And then they come and have an appreciation for what was originally done, and that's the whole thing. So hopefully, as we do all of this stuff, we reach some folks as well. And that's also part of all of this, and finding ways to reach more people, reach newer generations, and to preserve Elvis history, and make sure that Elvis history is not lost to history. It's very important to us that that is the case, and that we do whatever we can to make that happen. Because even the stuff that we lived through, I was born 3 years after Elvis died. Even the stuff we lived through is not something that can be repeated anymore. So many people are gone now that we met, that we talked with. So many stories are lost. That's one of the major things that propelled us to start this and want to do this, as we see so many things that could be lost, and we want to make sure we do whatever we can to make that not happen.
Right.
If you would like to join the EAP Society, we would love for you to become a member. Go to eapsociety.com and click on Become a Member. You can see all the different options. Members get videos early. They get unedited videos when we have to edit things for the main channel. They get exclusive content. We've got special gifts depending on the tier. We've got discounts on items when we finally do have the shop all up and rolling. All different kinds of things to have incentives for our members, so that way we can grow the channel and get the equipment and things that we need to preserve Elvis history for everybody, and in better and better quality. There's some amazing things that we can do together, and we need your help to do it. If you're able, please consider becoming a member. If nothing else, I completely understand if money's a little tight, it's all good. However, if you can, go like, comment, subscribe, share the videos, let other fans know, and let's grow the channel, make it nice and big so that we can monetize. That also helps, because when you like and comment and subscribe and click on the bell notification, that tells YouTube that our videos should be seen by more people, and that spreads it out in the algorithm so that even more people get to see it. And that allows us to do all of these things. We have some really cool plans and some folks that we were talking to try to make some things happen. If these things can go, it's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we want to try to find ways. We're looking into some ways to bring some of the vibes of Vintage Elvis Week to everybody. I'm excited if we can make it happen, and everything that you all can do to help us out doing that. We greatly appreciate it, because this is a passion for us. We love doing this, and the more support we have allows us to do that more.
Oh, absolutely. Me and Jamie have these Elvis conversations whether the cameras are on or not.
Exactly.
But your support helps keep the cameras on, so if you enjoy these, please keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Also, I would really be fascinated to hear anyone's takes on remixes. Do you love them?
Yeah.
Do you hate them? Do you have particular ones that you love and hate? Please comment. Let me know. We might even float a poll. If you had
fun.
If you had to choose between an FTD classic album edition of Having Fun with Elvis on Stage or Viva Elvis, which would you rather buy? I know my vote would be with the former. But let us know how you feel.
No. Here's the thing. The first thing that goes into my brain is I take Having Fun with Elvis on Stage as long as it's not edited.
This is cathartic for us,
Right?
You have to understand that.
Boy, so long time watchers of the channel. I mean, we've been only doing this for less than a year, but still, folks that have been with us and seen some of the other videos will know what we're referencing.
Yeah.
But anyway, oh gosh. So I guess on that one, go ahead, edit this. I don't care. If they would give us a box set of all of the concerts that they came from, not edited,
Be a big box set.
be a big box set. It would be infinitely better than having a classic album of that thing.
All right.
We can put it there because we're resourceful. We can edit those things back together ourselves.
Absolutely.
We absolutely will not, but we could. Give us the opportunity. Give us the raw materials. And we will absolutely not do that.
I mean, that's kind of what the FTD label is, if you think of it in a certain way.
It's true. It's true. But yeah. So the moral of the story is more complete sessions and less edits. That's the moral of the story. But anyway, so hope you enjoy this little look at remixes and the changes over the years and all this kind of stuff. It is a fascinating thing, and I'm really glad that we have the FTD with all of these, Our Memories of Elvis. And I wish this was complete, but this is nice to have, because it is a moment in time and is a piece of Elvis history, even if it may not be our favorite piece of Elvis history, but all of this stuff is fun to look at and geek out. And so if this is your first time checking out the channel, like, comment, share, subscribe. All helps out with the algorithm. We really, really appreciate it. And yeah, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Every Tuesday, we have Quick Take Tuesdays, where we look at one item from across Elvis history and kind of show you a little bit of that, so you get a taste of that. And then, of course, on Fridays, our main content. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. I'm Jamie.
And I'm John.
And this is the Elvis Archival Preservation Society. Until next time, be good to yourselves,
Be good to each other.
and always
TCB.
My society, my society. Here with all the friends I wanna see. Don't need no high society to get me where I wanna be. My society, yeah, that's for me. Oh, my society, yeah, that's for me. Oh, my society, yeah, that's for me. Oh, yeah.
that battery's dead in a damn door now.